of 1942, at the age of 17, he enlisted into the Canadian Army and volunteered as a paratrooper. He jumped into combat in Normandy on June the 5th, 1944, D-Day minus an hour. He landed in a flooded field and was captured.
On the 4th of June, they said, we're ready to go, but a storm came up that particular day, and they delayed it till the next day. So the next day, they said it was a go, so we packed all our gear, repacked it, packed it again, repacked it, got our ammunition, got our grenades, and our weapons and everything, live ammunition, loaded that up. And then I had additional equipment because I was a radio operator, and I carried a little radio with a couple of batteries, weighed about 15, 20 pounds, along with my other gear. And it was all packed in a little, like a sack, a gondola we called it, and strapped to my leg, you know, when we jumped. 10:30, they loaded us up, and we managed to get on that plane, the old C-47s, and, you know, waited, and then finally about 11 o'clock, 10:30, they took off, and then I guess they flew around getting themselves in formations. We had, they called it via V's, 9, 3, 3, and 3, via V's, and we started off for the shores of France, and I was the number 2 man that time, and I could look out the door and I could see nothing but planes. I mean, we looked like we were, wingtips were touching each other, we were so close to one another. And you look down on the ocean, on the channel there, and you could see the contrails of the ships down there. And it was just, it looked like you could walk across them, so many ships down there. And, you know, we were all joking and laughing, but once we got in the planes and started taking off and knew this was it, a lot of us did a lot of praying. And, you know, I would wonder if I was going to see the next day or not, next sunset or not. Didn't know, you know. Finally, when we seen the shores of France appear, the way it was when you put your foot out on the ledge of the plane's door, and when that coach passed, you counted to 3,000, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. If the light didn't come on to tell you to jump, you jumped. Well, as we were going across, the red light came on, which meant we all stood up, hooked up our parachutes to the static line, got into the door, and the first man was a young, what happened, as we crossed the French shores, everything exploded. It looked like the 4th of July left over. And our plane was rolling over the side, and the young lieutenant fell off in the back and hit the wall on the other side, and by that time, the green light came on, and we were so trained so much, when that green light came on, I shot out of the door. And my Griswold container that I had all my equipment in, my radios, my rifle, a few clothes, food, I was supposed to let it down on a rope. Well, it just took off, and I lost it. I don't know if it got shot out or not, but I never did find it. And we were only jumping from 300 feet, so you didn't have much time. Of course, we only had one chute. We never had reserves. And my chute opened, I looked around, I could see fire going all over, see planes falling, you know, on fire. And I said to myself, my God, this is for real, you know. I could feel in my heart. I knew it was going to come out of my chest, because it was pounding me like, oh, get out. And finally, I hit the ground and got into water about up to my waist. And I looked around, nobody was there. You know, I said, where's the rest of the state? Nobody was there. And I lost everything. I lost my weapon, lost, you know, my radio. And here I was in France with nothing but a little old parachute knife and a bandolier around my belly with 9mm ammunition in it. And I said, no, what am I to do? They told us at the briefing that the planes were flying in a certain direction. If you got confused, wait till the next wave of planes came over, and then if they were coming this way, you know, go to the left or go to the right. So I waited till the next wave, you know, was almost right on top of us anyway. I waited till they came by, and then the next thing you know, there were planes going left to right, north, south, east and west. So I just worked my way to the edge of the field, to where there's some kind of drives, you know, and shook my water out of my boots and everything like that. And I met another soldier there, and he was from altogether a different regiment. He didn't know where he was. I didn't know where we were. None of it was recognizable of what they showed us, you know, in their DZ of our briefing. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? And so we just started walking down the road, and another soldier would show up, another soldier would show up, and finally we got a captain showed up from the joining regiment on our left side, or left flank, whatever they called it. And he had a map, and we got to a kind of a road, and we had a French farmer came out and told us to disregard the way they had the signs on the road, because the Germans had switched them around so you couldn't go by those signs. But he told us how to get to our DZ. So as we walked along this road, we kept picking up, and of course there's firing going on all the time, but you know, it wasn't around us. It was maybe a field across from us or something like that. We got about, I guess about 4 or 5 miles, and we were told in the briefing that the Air Force was going to bomb those areas after everybody had jumped. Well, this was about, excuse me, I guess about 3 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's supposed to have been landed by then. And here comes these bombs, and British and American bombers, and they just pattern bombed the entire area, and that's where we got when the bombs started whistling coming down, we all jumped into the ditches, and there was quite a few of us, quite a few of the members got killed. That's the time when I got shrapnel in both my legs and my back, but it wasn't bad enough, you know, to lay me out or anything like that. I could still walk, and although it was hurting pretty bad. And we finally, I guess about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, we got into our DZ. Our objective was to secure the DZ, to blow up a radio transmitter, and to blow up, not to blow up a bridge, but to seize a bridge and plant explosive on it, ready to blow up. They told us that someone had already blown up the transmitter in the chateau there in Berryville, and our mission was then to go to this bridge and let the engineers plant their explosives and then secure the bridge, and not to blow it up unless the German armor started coming down towards the beaches. Well, when we got to the bridge, the lieutenant told me and about 3 others to go across and secure the far side of the bridge. Well, we did that after a lot of crawling and sweating, and there was 3 German soldiers over there that one of them got killed, the other 2 took off. We don't know where they went to. We didn't chase them. And we laid over there on that side of the bridge until the engineers were supposed to set up flares. A red flare was to tell us that the bridge had been, the explosives were placed on the bridge and for us to come back. Well, the red flare went up, so we started on our way back across, and the bridge blew up. So there we were, stuck on the far side of the bridge. There was only 4 of us there, and one of the boys said, well, I can work my way across the bridge and let them know that they're over here, and then you can come across. He started across, and the people on the other side didn't know who it was, so they started shooting at him, and eventually he got hit and fell into the river. Apparently he drowned, I don't know. And so the rest of us, the other 3 of us, stayed until it was daylight so they could see us. Well, when daylight came along, the Germans were, I guess, having a counterattack on the bridge, and that's when we got captured.
How much gear did you have with you?
Well, depended on what your position was.
Right.
Some people carried an M1, some carried a carbine, some had what's called a musette bag.
Right.
And
So did you carry an M1 or carbine?
carbine.
You got a carbine. Did you have to take it apart?
No, we had a folding stock carbine.
Oh, folding stock one, yeah.
And you strap it to your leg.
strapped it to your leg. Did you have that bag that hung down below like they talked about? About 100 pounds of equipment?
Well,
You had bandoliers, didn't you?
yeah, well, not for carbine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Carrying any hand grenades and
Most of the, other than personal weapon, was packed cargo.
packed in it. So you just had the rifle and a few essential things.
Reserve shoot. That's something.
Did you carry some rations with you and
Yeah.
first aid kit and morphine and
You know, little stuff,
that kind of stuff, huh?
Light stuff, big, heavier stuff was packaged in.
you all left at 22:45 and you got over the continental Europe somewhere in the Normandy area.
Yeah.
And you had a stick. How big? How many men were in your stick?
The 12-man stick.
12-man sticks.
There's two sticks per plane.
Oh, 2 sticks per plane, huh?
You know,
One stick was on one side and the other one on the other.
Port side went out first because the door was on that side.
Right.
You go out first, and depending on situation, you're supposed to either get the other on there quickly, or make a rerun over the field for the second stick to jump.
Oh, was that right? They'd circle around, come back, and drop the second stick, huh? Did you get any anti-aircraft fire on there?
Yeah.
Any that would strike the plane?
Well, it sounded like it was being
Like
shot
raining,
off.
huh? Scared you anyway, didn't it?
Enough to make you want to get out of it.
Right. And so y'all jumped. Now, when you landed, pitch black dark, right? Anybody land nearby you?
Well, we could, we knew there was somebody pretty close. But
Pretty close.
We didn't land like we were supposed to.
Right.
We scattered all over.
Now, did you use the clicker? Or did you
No.
have one?
I did.
You know, the click, click?
Yeah. That reminds me of the movie where the guy
Right.
clicked and he got shot. Well, that's bull. There ain't no German dumb enough to not have a round in his chamber.
Right, right, yeah. It was like the guy was cocking his
He
weapon.
loaded his weapon. That's bull.
Yeah, you had one ready to go, right?
And you bet you.
Yeah.
The tootie that German wasn't standing there without a round in his
Yeah.
in his chamber.
So how many people did you get together right off the bat?
That's 6 or 7. I think.
6 or 7 of you?
Yeah. I don't know.
So what did you do? Did you pull out a compass or something and try to figure out what direction you're going to go in?
We had our platoon sergeant he was pretty well up on it. He got us together pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What we the ones we could find.
Mm-hmm.
We still didn't went way below strength.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody was all over the place. I guess you got pretty much some from your 2 sticks there, I guess. Got them together, and so you just started marching then somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And did you bump into any enemy people on the way?
A few. It didn't really light up that night.
Yeah, it was completely dark, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So what happened at daylight?
Well, we tracked down some Germans.
Right. Did any event strike you the most during that time in encountering some of them?
Well, it's sort of hard to lay out exactly or near what was happening because
Well, obviously there were some
a lot of
firefights in there,
a
right?
lot of confusion and
Confusion, yeah. Well, it said in the reports here that y'all stayed around a while, and the cost was 898 men killed, wounded, missing, or captured.
We were not the first wave in on D-Day.
Right.
We went in, it was dusk, I believe,
Now, was this on the 6th or the 7th?
the 6th.
6th.
And
It was late in the afternoon then, right?
huh?
Late in the afternoon.
Yeah, because it was still a little dark
Mm-hmm.
when we started going ashore. And I remember
Now, was that high tide? Did you have to go in at high tide?
you
or
have to
low?
go in on high tide.
Right.
The tide comes back out, and you're
Right.
stuck on the beach
Yeah.
until the high tide comes back in again.
Yeah.
Oh, my memory serves me correct. There was a battleship off on the port side, way off on the port side,
Mm-hmm.
shooting shells into the beach,
Mm-hmm.
in Normandy. And I remember a slew of P-38 fighters coming overhead. And then, of course, we hit the beach and unloaded our cargo.
Mm-hmm. So that was late in the afternoon.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay, and but there was still a lot of activity going on there, right? A lot of fire.
Well, we were at Sword Beach. I didn't land Omaha.
You didn't. You went to Sword.
We landed on Sword Beach.
Okay. You did go to others besides Sword then.
Oh yeah, we hit Omaha.
Oh, you hit Omaha.
We hit Omaha too, and we hit Gold. We were on the beach one. I'm not sure if it was Sword or Omaha. The beach.
Mhm.
It might have been Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a rail gun way up on the top of the cliff.
Ah.
And that rail gun would just go down the shoreline and drop shells.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, we had what they called barrage balloons
Mhm.
attached to the ship. And we had to cut them down because the Germans were focusing in
On the
on the barrage balloons.
Yeah.
We were hit 5 times.
Really.
2 of them were just about water level, so we weren't too bad. We made it back to Southampton and went into dry dock.
Some casualties, didn't you?
One guy, we had one man was killed.
Mm-hmm.
He was hit by shrapnel,
Oh.
and he's buried in that field out in Normandy there.
We discussed it among the officers and the captain about what we were going to do, or try to do. And he said it's going to 2 battleships out there. They're going to bombard the beach before we go in, and the Air Force is going to drop bombs on it. And they ain't touched. They're still waiting. I'm still waiting to see if they're going to drop any stuff on that beach. That beach was just as clean and slick as the floor in this house. But we knew all about it. They had some guys there. I take my hat off to the guys that went in. They must have went in at night. When we got up that morning, they told us this is it. So we got up. It was still dark. I don't know what time it was, but they blew the whistle to get us up, and they put us on the boat. Then we went out in these LCVPs, and we went around and around and around to line up to go in.
And then when you guys started going in, that's when all hell started breaking loose, I'm sure.
They didn't shoot at us when we were coming in. They waited till we hit the beach. They figured they could shoot us quicker. Well, after all, they had open place.
And tell me about that. I mean, it was when that door opened on your transport boat that took you to the beach.
The LCVP.
LCVP. All hell broke loose at that point, correct? I mean,
Yeah, just a few minutes afterwards, yeah.
And so then basically, at that point, from what I've read, it sounds like all order that may have been planned ahead of time went out the window, basically.
Sure did.
Well, this is another question, I'm diverting a little bit, but what were you armed with when you went on shore? What did they give you to fight with?
A rifle.
You remember, was it an M1 rifle?
That's all I had was a rifle.
Do you have grenades or anything with you? Or
Yeah, I had, yeah.
I'm just curious what you all carried.
Yeah, like grenades, a rifle, that's all. But then
platoon had a mortar. But then he was so far away we couldn't tell him anything. As a matter of fact, our captain got killed on the beach. He was trying to set up a mortar there when I found out later.
And you were telling me, and we'll go back and forth here,
Yeah.
when you finally, by the time you all got on the beach, you started off with how many men, and it ended up
38 men, and that night there was 11 of us.
bad casualties, horrible casualties. One of the things I was going to ask you that I didn't ask you the other day, there were no holes from the artillery fire. What did you get behind when they were shooting at you? What did you do to try?
Nothing. We just laid there. We just laid there. There's nothing.
Just crawled your way slowly but surely.
That's right.
That's got to have been very, very difficult.
I think if I turned my head one way one time, I wouldn't be here today. I think if I did this or this, because I just felt something, you know. But you can see it if you get up close enough. You can see this little scar there. And that, the good Lord was looking out for me that day.
It just grazed you.
Yeah.
But that's
And
close.
it couldn't go. I could have got a Purple Heart if there had been a medic there, but there was no medics. I mean, and they didn't come in until the next day.
Yeah. When you got to the hedgerow, tell me the story about the hedgerow again. Tell me about what the problem was with that and how it was solved. You told me last night, but tell me again the other day.
You see, a farmer owned his land, and they didn't have any maps 1,000 years ago or so forth. So the farmer planted a little, little mound of dirt, maybe that high. And as the years went by, vegetation, it grew and grew and grew, and it got up 6, 7, 8 feet. And the hedgerows went around every farmer's farm. See, so if you advance, you had to go over the hedgerow and go forward and go to the hedgerow. Well, the Germans, they dug holes in each corner of the far part of that field, and as we came in, they said, hello. So we did the best we could. But then this GI tells them, I'll tell you how to get through. And he, put 2 cylinders on a tank, go in, pull out, blow it up, and then the tank come in and get it out. And that's the way we got through there. I never saw any generals. I never saw any colonels from the big shots, All I saw was as a matter of fact, I didn't see too much of our own colonels, our own battalion headquarters. I didn't see too much of them. They left us to. But anyway, this General Canto was his name, I think. We were up there one day, and we'd come to an open field, and it was about 200 or 300 yards between hedgerows. So naturally, we stopped. You just don't move from one dangerous position to another. He comes up and says, what you waiting for? Something like that. Says, well, we got to see what it is, It's about 200 or 300 yards to the next hedgerow. And he says, well, there ain't but one way to find out. And he took his pistol out and said, let's go. And he went with us. And that's the only time I ever saw a general could have got into combat.
Then comes in January, and if I was called in either in January or February of 44 to the company commander, and he said, Raven says, he said, this is purely a voluntary thing. And you know what voluntary means in the Army. If you don't accept it, you are dead done. Well, of course, I said, yes, I'll be glad to do it. He said, now you are going to be in charge of the non-coms in what they call an information team. That's a team that is formed to give information as to progress of D-Day invasion from Corps headquarters to Army headquarters. That was General Bradley was Army headquarters, and General Giroux was Corps. And then also the information from the divisions. The information team consisted of 2 ducks.
Tell us what a duck
in
is.
case you don't know what a duck is, they took a truck and they made it amphibious so it would work, so it would float. And on that, they put a cabin that included radio things, the transmitter and the receivers and all the supplies and things. Well, we had, and this information team included 2 ducks and 2 jeeps. The ducks had a couple of drivers on them and 3 operators. So that afternoon of the 5th, we started out again, and ships everywhere.
Now, when you say you started out, do you mean your ship that you were on
The
the
LST.
LST? You actually departed then?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
The LST we started out on the 5th, and the weather was rough. It was raining, wind was blowing, it was miserable. But anyhow, it was a vast sea of ships, line after line of ships. Then I laid down that night, but I didn't sleep. About 1 or 2 o'clock, we were called, time to go. So we got up and they gave us some C rations, some K rations. If you don't know what they are, that's all right. They gave us a little breakfast, and then we boarded the duck. This was one thing that had worried me from word go, was how we were going to leave the duck, the LST. We had heard through different sources that in Italy, the ducks had a time getting off of the LSTs in there, and they would go to the bottom. So I was a little leery. Well, they opened up the LST. They lowered the ramp. The ramp was about 60 degrees. And you can imagine the duck being overweighted. There we were, we had all that personnel on it, all the equipment, and on the sides we had to carry gas for 24 hours. And we had fixed a ramp on there to, I guess it was about 12 cans of jerry cans.
These are cans of gasoline.
Gasoline. Of course, with that, we also had, inside that, we had jerry cans of some water too. Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine how much overload that thing had. And I was scared so what we all did, we got outside. I know most of them got outside. I got right at the door. Because if that had come up, I'd have been gone. See, we had what they call, what did they call? It was safety things that we wore.
Harnesses of some
No,
sort?
no, I can't think of the name of them. But anyhow, we wore those to make us float.
May West.
May West, thank you, May West. And of course, you had a little thing there to the side, you mash, and they'd fill up. Well, anyhow, we came out of that all right. One thing, thank goodness, we had a good pump on our dug. And the water that we took, we took water. Anyhow, we got out of that fine. Then we started our slow procedure to the beach. I don't know how far it was. I thought it was 10 miles or 5 miles.
About what time of night is this?
This was around 2 or 2:30
So this is 2 or 2:30 in the morning?
in the morning.
Pitch black dark
Pitch black dark.
in the English
In
Channel,
the English Channel.
and you're in a duck. Okay.
And we're in a duck. And the thing went about 5 miles, about, I don't know, it might have gone 5 miles an hour, but it was slow, of course, and it took a lot of gas. But anyhow, we slowly, till finally we got to our place of operation. Now, our operation was to be, we were to be about, I would say 200 or 300 yards off the beach. Otherwise, we would pass the row of ships, battleships, cruisers, infantry ships and everything. We were within that place. And at 6:30, we went on the air, exactly at 6:30.
Now, there were 2 ducks that were equipped like yours?
2 ducks, but of course we weren't together. They were one, and then they were all at another location. The 2 Jeeps was on LCIs, and they never did make it in. They were dumped out in the water, in too deep of water, and of course they went to the bottom. And the operation included Colonel Talley kept General Giroux informed as to the waves. Otherwise had first wave, second wave, third wave. They knew what included in each one of the waves. And they had certain sections of the Omaha Beach. We were on Easy Red.
Well, we trained in England, and when D-Day actually happened, D-Day was actually scheduled for June 5th, but the inclement weather caused a detour, and everybody we went across the channel on LCT, which was a landing craft tank. And before, I was assigned to a skipper of a landing craft who was a British skipper that had been on invasions before in North Africa. And I thought I was fortunate in getting someone that had been on invasion before, because we never had encountered anything like this. And we worked out our plan together about how to load the landing craft, first on, last off. We started on the invasion on June 5th. And of course, everybody on board was terribly seasick. I think if the whole German army was on the beach, I was saying, get me off this ship. I just wanted to get off this water. But the fact that he had been on a landing on an invasion before, he was very cautious. We were scheduled for H+4. D-Day was on June 6th. H hour was 6:30 in the morning, and we were scheduled to go in at 10:30. When we rendezvoused to go in, on either side of us were Yankee skippers. They hit the beach and dropped the ramps right on the beach where this British skipper I was with, he dropped his ramp, I thought it was in mid-ocean, and the first two Jeeps that went off sank. We lost equipment, maps, cameras, whatever it may be on the Jeeps. And he was screaming at me to get off his boat. And we were receiving incoming fire from artillery and from machine gun fire. But I refused to get off, even though I was in command of the troops. As the skipper of the boat, he was in command of me and everybody else on the boat. But he finally lifted up and started sounding, moving in closer. And he finally dropped his ramp again, and I took off. And we hit the beach. And as I said, on the beach it was just mass confusion. This was Utah Beach. And I was assigned to rendezvous with the company at a predetermined location. But all the landmarks that I had memorized from the sand tables were all obliterated because from the artillery fire from the naval ships and from the bombarding from the Air Force, all of our landmarks were obliterated. They were gone. And when I hit the beach, there were MPs on the beach. And I asked an MP about direction, and he said, ask that man. And I looked down, it was a decapitated man. But we eventually met with the company. It was about dusk. And we were told at that time to remain perfectly quiet. And even though it was June and it was cold, the paratroopers, the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne, had dropped right in front of us. And the paratroopers, when they took off their parachutes, they just laid them on the ground. And that night, I wrapped up in a silk parachute to stay warm and wouldn't move, even though there were foxholes that were dug in the ground by the Germans who had occupied this area before. We had been warned about these foxholes might be mined, and be careful. And the next morning when we woke up, it's when we captured our first prisoner, who was a German sleeping with us. And he immediately threw up his hands and surrendered. That was our first prisoner. Our mission of our company and our division was to capture Cherbourg, which was a port city. And we eventually went through the hedgerow country trying to reach Cherbourg. And just as an aside, our division, our combat unit, was 15,000 men. And during the course of the war, we had 45,000 casualties, a 3-time turnover. But fortunately, I came through the war without a scratch.
on D-Day morning, I think it was early in the morning, we heard all the airplane. I never heard that much airplanes flying all the time. And we found out D-Day had come, and then my group was asked to get a lot of photographs right behind the lines to see what the German reaction was to the invasion. And we sent out on the mission I had, they sent two groups, and that's the only time in my flying in combat area that I flew with another airplane. Up until then, everything was by yourself, and most of it at very high altitudes, 30 to 35,000 feet. If it was cloudy, you just come home and didn't get the pictures. But that day, it was overcast, and they were anxious to get the pictures of the Germans' reaction on the rail lines and roads of what was happening behind the invasion. We sent out two groups of two airplanes, and they stayed on top of the overcast and didn't have any pictures. Well, I was assigned about 1:30 that afternoon for a mission, me and Lieutenant Cosby that was with me, to go and try to get pictures of a railroad line from Orleans to Le Mans. And we would have followed a railroad, and the weatherman briefed us, and here's a picture of the mission from Oxford. We went to cross the French coast in the vicinity of Le Havre, and then over to Orleans, and we let down through the overcast and happened to come out very close to Orleans, which is a miracle. And at my age now, I'd never try that. But when you're young, you don't know any better. So, anyway, and the weatherman had briefed us that we would have an overcast. There might be breaks in it, but there wasn't. And that we did have if we went down under it, the clouds would be above the ground where you could get under them. So we did let down, got on the railroad tracks, and in order to take a continuous picture with the kind of camera equipment we had, we had to go down to below the clouds, but you had to stay a good bit above the ground because the cameras were not set to take a continuous picture unless you had a little altitude. So that meant we had to fly at about the minimum is 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet to get a continuous picture. Well, we got under it, got on the railroad track and started up it, and got the shadow done, and that's when we run into flak, and I got hit.
Well, Ed, what altitude were you when you encountered the flak?
About 1,500 or 2,000 foot, and the flak hit my airplane at right about here, and it filled up with smoke, and I had to bail out, and I bailed out in a P-30 or F-5. I called it P-38, but it's F-5, which has no guns. That's the difference. And it was supposed to be faster because when you take the guns out, you take a lot of weight out, and it makes the airplane faster. And when I bailed out, you normally would brief that you try to roll it over on its back so you could drop straight down because it had a boom all the way across the back. Anybody's familiar with it, it's got twin booms and a thing across the back. And if you're going at normal speeds and bail out, you would hit the stabilizer. But I think we were going between around 325 to 350 miles an hour. And when I opened the canopy, out I went without any, and was fortunate enough to go over the top of the boom, and I don't open the parachute, opened at high speed, and I only stayed a very short time. I didn't have time hardly to look at the countryside, and landed in a hayfield. And I hadn't just got in the hayfield, and the first thing we were briefed to do was get rid of our 45. We always wore a 45 for survival, or to help you. If you tried to escape, you would have a way to kill an animal or that type thing, not to fight the Germans with. So the first thing you were supposed to do is get rid of the gun so they couldn't catch you and say you were a spy and that you had shot somebody. And I threw the gun in a haystack, and about that time the Germans came up and got me. not knowing any German, and I guess them not knowing any English. It was German Wehrmacht, I guess, privates are not, in other words, they didn't seem to know a whole lot about it. And I had a British flying suit on with the 45 had a US on it, and the gun, they found it right away, and they couldn't understand how I could be an American pilot with a British flying suit